Well, I'm delighted to welcome to Kyiv Post the renowned aerospace engineer from the US, author, I would say even political commentator in recent times, and a foremost authority on Mars and getting there eventually. Robert, welcome to Ukraine.
Well, thank you, and I'm really honored, frankly, to be here, to have been invited to speak at the InScience conference.
So this is the reason you're speaking at a scientific conference?
Yes. This is a conference. I actually spoke there in 2018, and they invited me back this time, and the theme of this conference is Science for Victory, Science to Rebuild Ukraine.
You've just published a few days ago a really good op-ed in Kyiv Post explaining more or less your position that you will elaborate at the conference. Maybe you could just tell our viewers what is your message as a scientist, as an engineer to this conference at this stage of things?
Well, there's a couple of things. Okay. One is my view of the importance of this matter, which I know the Ukrainians are fighting for their lives and for their country, and that's important enough, but I think it's even more important than that. In the article I quoted Lincoln, who in 1858 gave a very famous speech in which he said, "A house divided cannot stand. I do not believe this union can persist half slave and half free. It will become all one or all the other." Now, the forces of freedom won that war, but the world today is a house divided, half slave and half free. And I think that it cannot remain that indefinitely, that it will be all one or all the other, and the outcome of this war will determine which way it's going to go.
So you're telling us that the war in Ukraine is the battle line between despotism and democracy?
Yes, exactly. And the stakes here are extremely high. If Ukraine was to lose, and it could only lose at this point if the West loses its nerve, okay, then, well, Putin acquires Ukraine, he expands his domain, he brings his forces to the borders of Poland and Romania, he's vastly reinforced domestically, he eliminates a key strategic weakness along his southwestern border that restrains him from attacking elsewhere. And most importantly, he demonstrates that the West ultimately has no will to fight, which means deterrence is done. Okay? If we're not willing to defend Ukraine when all we have to do is send arms to people willing to fight, are we going to really be willing to send our own troops to defend Estonia or Poland or Taiwan? Okay? Not a chance. And the dictators will know that, and they will act accordingly. And some countries that need not be named will look at that and say, okay, we got to cut our deals with the authoritarian regimes, and the few that will fight, I mean, for example, the Poles will fight no matter how hopeless it is, they'll have the odds stacked against them. So really, this is the turning point right here. We have to win this.
Okay, well, I can imagine if you were a journalist, a politician, a historian saying this. You're a scientist.
Yes.
What brings you as a scientist into this battle in defense of freedom, into the forefront of it?
Oh, well, first of all, I am a partisan of freedom, okay? And I'm fairly well read in history. But in terms of as a scientist, okay, science is both the child and the parent of freedom. It is. Okay, you need freedom to create science, and science contributes to freedom by liberating us from toil and disease and all these things that stand in the way of freedom. But also, I mean, science has a faith, and that faith is the search for truth. And I have to say, I have never seen a regime that not only lies, okay, but mocks truth itself, mocks the idea that anything is true, okay, that laughs at the idea of truth. they assassinate Litvinenko, and they do it with polonium so everyone will know that they had done it, and then they say, we didn't do it. They send an army into Crimea, and they say, we don't know whose army that is. They say 2 days before the invasion of Ukraine this time around, we're not going to invade, and then they do. Okay, they have a systematic campaign to destroy Ukraine's electricity generation facility, and then they blow up the biggest hydroelectric dam in Ukraine, possibly, perhaps the world, and they say, oh, we didn't do that. And they say that to the world while domestically they brag about it. Okay, in other words, they laugh at the idea of truth itself. And in addition to the fact that they are anti-freedom, the fact that they are anti-truth, if their side was to prevail in this war, we're talking about a new dark age.
Yes, your article was read very much as a defense of enlightenment, progress against the forces of atavism, dark ages, as you say. Very nicely put, and I strongly recommend those who haven't read your article to read it in our pages. When did you come to this realization, particularly with respect to Russia? Is it something that's occurred in recent years, or have you always, what was your attitude towards the Soviet Union, for example?
My attitude towards the Soviet Union was considerably more tolerant than towards the Putin regime. Now, part of that was due to an illusion. The Soviets claimed to represent forces of progress. They certainly were leading edge in space, actually. And while they, no society lives up to their ideals, but they certainly did not live up to theirs. But nevertheless, the ideals that they promoted were interesting, whereas with the Putin regime, this is just an organized crime network.
Let me change the subjects a bit. Look, you're also a foremost authority on Mars.
I think that human expansion to Mars will contribute, at least contribute to the possibility of world peace, because, see, look, the ultimate argument for tyranny is the necessity for war, or the putative necessity for war. And the ultimate argument for the necessity of war is that there isn't enough for everyone, okay? But if we can show that by working together we can open up planets, then it really doesn't make sense to be killing each other to fight over provinces. So by showing that the human condition is not a zero-sum condition, you undermine those whose existence relies on people's belief in the necessity for war. Okay, now, that said, so space, the human expansion of space is extremely important for peace in that it undermines the ideology of war. But that said, it's also important in war, okay? That is, the science has a stick, okay? It enables those who believe in it, right? Okay, in fact, that's how you know it's science, because if the people that believe in it can do things that people who don't believe in it can't, it means they're right. And now, this war here is, in a very real sense, the first space war. Now, of course, the fighting is almost all occurring on the ground. The dying is all occurring on the ground. But in determining the outcome, Ukraine is holding its own because of space technology, space-based communications, space-based reconnaissance systems, space-based GPS targeting of precision munitions. This is how Ukraine is holding its own against forces that outnumber it 3-1 numerically, okay, because your weapons can hit 10-1 more accurately because of these technological cruisers. When you sank these technological advantages, when you sank the Russian cruiser, okay, it was done with 2 precision-guided missiles. It wasn't done by firing 50 missiles and having 2 of them hit. It was firing 2 missiles and they both hit, okay, because of space-based assets. Now, Of course, the United States has used space-based technologies for its war with Iraq, but they weren't decisive. We would have beaten Saddam Hussein whether we had space assets or not. They were therefore just a frill, a convenience. Here, they're an absolute necessity. And I believe that, well, it's great that the Biden administration is providing these capabilities to Ukraine, but I think Ukraine needs to start developing its own capabilities in these areas, because I wish I could say that you can always count on America, but you can't. Okay,
Robert,
when we're good, but...
That's a very good point. I interject and I want to say I'm talking to Robert Zubrin, distinguished aerospace engineer from the States, but I seem to hear echoes of Carl Sagan in the philosophy and the depth and the understanding, the insight. My question to you now is, are the Ukrainians capable of developing such a sophisticated, shall we say, response to the times, given that they're experiencing a very serious brain drain because of the war? Many of the best minds have left, fled, or have gone to fight and been killed.
Well, I think you're going to get a lot of those people back. First of all, there are certain things, and these are the things that I can't really talk about now, that could be done now in this particular conflict to augment your capabilities. But I think that Ukraine will repel this invasion. Okay, I think you will prevail. But Russia's not going to go away. And they'll be back. And I think Ukraine needs to develop the capabilities that will allow it to deal much more handily with them when they come back the next time. And it shouldn't depend upon who happens to be on top at the moment in Washington, okay? Yeah. Biden has supplied a certain amount of support. I wish he provided more and faster, but he certainly did better than the previous two administrations. You know, in 2014, Ukraine was winning in Donetsk, and then the Russians massed forces for a counterattack and encircled the Ukrainians and administered a defeat. There's no way those forces could have evaded our reconnaissance satellites. The Obama administration simply declined to share that intelligence with you. Now, this time, the Biden administration did share the intelligence of the impending attack with you. Unfortunately, they didn't provide enough arms in advance to deter it, but still, at least they provided the intelligence. But, you know, the administration's changed in Washington. Ukraine needs to have these capabilities of its own, and it will need to take advantage of the pause after it drives out this invasion to develop these capabilities. It's the only way it's going to keep the peace.
Robert Zubrin, our guest at Kyiv Post, not only a renowned aerospace engineer, author, commentator, author of many books, some of the last few, The Case for Space, translated into Ukrainian.
Yes.
You've just made the case for Ukraine.
Yes.
We thank you very much for being with us, and we wish you well, and please keep contributing to us and to the cause generally.
Okay. It's a pleasure and an honor to help you in this cause.
Thank you, Robert.